Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at AmericanExpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
It absolutely fucking terrified me, that scene, because literally, I mean, it's the one film, it's spectacular on the big screen, don't get me wrong, but it's the one film that I would genuinely recommend people watch on a laptop in their bedrooms, because once that scene in the with the bedsheet hits, it's the perfect setting to be absolutely terrified by your own duvet.
I think kids in horror film, I mean, I quite like them. I think they're a good addition, but I know not everyone does.
I mean, I just generally find kids creepy, so their presence in general just creeps me out.
Hello, film fans. Joining us today, we have Anna.
Hello.
Mike.
Hello.
And as always, Kobe.
Hello.
And we're here to review Under the Shadow. Thank you, as always, to the mighty people for the mighty, mighty tunes. And thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
at Flixwatcher Pod and on Instagram
at Flixwatcher. Hello and welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher Podcast. Joining us remotely today, we have Anna and Mike. If you would like to say hello and tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
I'm Anna. I'm a freelance film programmer, film writer, and podcaster. I'm the co-founder of The Final Girls, which is a horror film collective that explores the intersections between horror and feminism. I host the Final Girls podcast and co-host the Next Supremes, an American Horror Story rewatch podcast.
Nice. So what is it about American Horror Story that you feel needs to have a new podcast?
What doesn't it have? It's got literally all the things that I love. Gruesome, grisly, gory horror, high camp, Jessica Lange, aliens, nuns, old Hollywood, Lady Gaga, a lot of Matt Bomer and Finn Wittrock, Evan Peters everywhere, random appearances by Stevie Nicks and Patti LuPone. I mean, what's not to love?
I can see you've thought about this a lot, hence why you're doing a podcast.
It's kind of what I imagine it to be like inside Anna's brain, actually. One of those things she just said.
Pretty much.
So I've got a question for Anna. So being a female film fan, do you find like now that obviously kind of like podcasts exist more, that it's more acceptable for females to be into horror? Because I always found that when I was growing up, like girls were never allowed to like horror, and it seemed to be a lot harder to find female horror fans. I don't know if that was the same for you.
Totally was the same for me, and it's actually one of the motivations for my friend Olivia and I to have set up the Final Girls about 4 years ago now. It's to create spaces that were inclusive and not fall into the trappings of not just horror fans, but film fans in general can, it's semi-affectionately what I call film bros, which tend to have a very particular take on film love and cinephilia. That's kind of, it's the same thing basically, but it's kind of competitive list making and trying to test other people on their knowledge or thinking that somehow they deserve the space to be fans of a particular genre or film more than others. And I kind of think that's bullshit. And it's a thing that anybody can love. And if you're particularly drawn towards horror or particular types of horror as well, because it's not a uniform genre, then you just watch everything. Yeah, of course there's different types.
So, I mean, speaking of horror and the evolution of horror, who are you, sir?
Hello, I'm Mike. I am a TV and video producer. I currently produce the BBC's Inside Cinema strand on iPlayer, and I also, as you alluded to, present the Evolution of Horror podcast.
So, talk about that, guys. Mike, sorry, tell us about the background, why you started the show, and why horror works for you as the genre you want to double down on.
Oh God, it's really hard to answer that. I don't know. I have loved horror my whole life. It's really hard to know why. I think I just love that catharsis, that kind of roller coaster thrill that you get from horror, that kind of experiencing fear and danger and all the stuff that you get in horror, but in a kind of safe space. It's sometimes the most fun genre to watch with audiences and with friends and on your own. I just love it. I love all horror from any era and any subgenre, and that's why I started the podcast, because I think there is actually a lot of horror fans out there, and ones that I just wasn't necessarily aware of. And starting a podcast in which I'm joined by a different guest every single episode, I suddenly started to realize how many people in my life and how many people I met were also obsessed with horror and wanted to talk about horror. So the podcast kind of looks at, as the title suggests, it looks at the sort of evolution and history of the genre from sort of early cinema and Universal monsters in the 30s all the way through to now. And I'm joined by a different guest every week to talk about a different film. And Anna, of course, is probably the most frequent guest. We've discussed a whole bunch of films together.
One of the things I love about lots of different podcasts is when different podcasts talk about the same film. And recently I was listening to episodes from both your shows talking about The Invisible Man. And you both had Lee Whannell on, didn't you?
Yeah.
Talking about that.
We even both saw each other, like Anna was coming out of the interview room as I was going in. So we like high-fived each other as that interview was happening.
It's like, is this for your show? Yes, it's for mine as well. But I love how different people talk. Yeah, you have different opinions on how what's good and what different takes on the podcast. So if there's a film I want to get under the skin more, because Empire did a spoiler special, then listen to your guys' episodes about it. I think if you're really into a film, there's no better time to be listening to podcasts and listening to all these different media about them, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I watch a film that I love listening to all of my favourite podcasts discuss it. And you're right, like even if it's multiple podcasts all discussing the same film, I kind of love hearing all the different takes on it. Yeah,
me too. And even when there's a particular show as well that's airing, like I used to do this with Game of Thrones as well. I'd listen to maybe about 3 or 4 different podcasts, analyze every single episode, and same with Westworld too. Yeah,
now's a prime time to be a geek. So we're talking today about Under the Shadow, which is your choice, Anna.
Yes, it is.
Can you tell us first of all why you chose it, and secondly a synopsis in 1 minute or less?
Well, I chose it because I actually programmed this film just before it was released in the UK. So this is back in 2016 in a previous job I had, and I haven't revisited it since. So I thought it would be a really good opportunity to watch it again. And I've recommended it over the years to almost anyone I've spoken to, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing its director, Babak Anvari, several times. So it's just a lovely film to go back to. Well, lovely may not be the right word, but we'll see.
So when you say program, what was it for a festival, and why did you feel it was worthy of inclusion for that festival?
It wasn't for a festival. It was I programmed it for the BFI when I was programming for the regular Cinematech program at BFI South Bank, and it was with a post-screening Q&A with Babak and the leading actress of the film as well. And it was just just before release. So this film was screened at Fright Fest that year. So that would have been August. And I think it was released late August 2016. So it was around that time that I screened it too. And to be honest, because I was trying really hard to bring more genre into the wider program when I was working there. And I thought this was an exceptional film that worked very well for both genre and non-genre audiences. And I thought, what better place to be able to screen it than the BFI's NFT1 screen?
So what, can you give us the synopsis in 1 minute?
Yes. So this is a film set in war-torn Tehran in the 1980s, and it follows a mother and her daughter who are both struggling to cope with the realities of a war-torn city and the constant threat of bombing and war erupting on their doorstep, and also a mysterious evil that begins to haunt their house.
Have you guys seen a film called For Sama?
Yes.
Yes. That is one of the reasons why I love this film so much, because in some ways it's quite a traditional haunted house horror film, but I think the setting, the time and place in sort of 80s Tehran, war-torn Tehran, means that there is, like you said, there's as much danger outside of this building as there is within it. And I love that about it. There's this feeling that I completely get behind this character, this main character, this woman who is so desperate to stay in her home because she knows that it can be just as dangerous or just as difficult for her out there, which is a great reason for her staying in this haunted building as well. You know, it's always a problem with horror films where you're like, well, why wouldn't you just leave? Just get the hell out of there. But this film kind of solves that problem in some ways.
Do you think it does, though? Because I that was my main kind of thing through this film, was like, can you not just go? I mean, she could have, obviously there's the thing about the doll, which kind of makes her and the daughter feel they need to be based there. But there was a point earlier on where they could have gone quite early on, I would have thought, before the supernatural element came into play so much. Anna, you're nodding.
Yeah, well, I think that's a fair point, but that has to go back to the nature of the characters as well. Like when we first meet her, she's very headstrong, very stubborn, almost about staying put. You know, her husband is stationed elsewhere in another city, and she has the opportunity to go with him, but she chooses not to. And, you know, the whole film is as much of a haunted house film as much as it is a woman who's haunted and needs to go on a journey of understanding her own limitations. And when sorry, my cat just jumped over me, I would not get off. It's also her own journey of coming to terms with the limitations of what she can do, how far she can go to protect her space, and also letting go of things. You know, she has to let go of her dream of becoming a doctor. She has to let go of the protection of her house. She has to let go of kind of this sense of grief and shame that she's holding on to throughout the entire film. And so actually I think I completely understand why she would not leave when she had the chance. And she's a very kind of grounded person. Like, she's not going to believe in horror stories or fairy tales or superstitions. You know, we learn from the very first scene that she was a medical student, that she's politically active, that she's very, very headstrong. So obviously when her neighbor or her neighbor's kid and her daughter start muttering about the djinn or a haunting of some sort, she completely brushes that off. This is nonsense to her. So, you know, it takes her a while to believe the situation that she encounters herself in. And this is such a classic trope as well of haunted house films. You know, the people who are at the center of these stories never believe the supernatural things that are going on until it is literally slapping him in the face.
It's quite a shock when that arrives. The lady, as they kind of refer to, is kind of oh shit, that's really creepy. It's like Helen's got, ignore what I'm going to say. Helen, what were your thoughts on the creepiness of the film generally?
So I really wanted to like this a lot more than I actually did, and I can't quite put my finger on it because I really like the kind of the ideas behind it, and you do really feel for, is it Shideh? Basically, she's just kind of like being oppressed by everything. She's being oppressed by the neighbors for leaving the gate. She's being oppressed by people on the street for not covering her hair. She's being oppressed by her own child. She's being oppressed by the war. She's having to hide her Jane Fonda. So I kind of really, really, really feel for her, and you could just feel like, you know, she's going through this like entire personal pressure, and then there's an entire war going on around her as well. So I really, really like that. But when I was watching it, I just couldn't get out of my head that this is sort of like the Babadook, but just not quite as affecting for me. And like the two films are very, very kind of similar in their sort of situation. So there's a lot that I really, really liked about it, and I really liked the two main performances, in particular Dorsa, the little girl. But I don't know, I didn't love it as much as I really wanted to.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not so down on this film. I think I love the fact it was set in this kind of. It had this setting in Tehran through the Iran-Iraq conflict. I was just like, just leave, just go.
But the thing is, like, also, I got the reason. Maybe one of the reasons she didn't want to go is that she's been then being controlled by her husband telling her what to do, and we've already established that she's very much her own person. And then also, like, the in-laws must be really terrible, or the kind of the alternative is kind of worse than what it is now, maybe. So, and also it's, if she left, then there wouldn't be a film. So the fact that she doesn't leave instantly or take the easy kind of route out, you know, because there's, you know, in certain horror films, there's like weird shit happening in the house, and the weird shit happens and they go, right, we're going to move. So they amazingly are able to find a new place within like days, pack an entire house up in like half a day and move into a new house. But then the scary thing still follows them there anyway. And it makes the film. So it wasn't that. All I had was that by doing that, she's kind of like taken the easy route out, which she doesn't because she's really strong. She's having to kind of like be controlled by her husband, and that the in-laws are probably not the place she wants to be right now.
But then, you know, the flat above them's got a massive missile stuck in it. So for me, that'd be like,
I love that.
Yeah.
I see. I think it's so. I think it does such a good job of explaining why she wouldn't want to leave her flat. Her flat is like her little safe bubble where she can be herself, and she can wear what she wants to wear, and she can watch her Jane Fonda tapes, and she can be free. Sure. I suppose she can be the woman she wants to be, and there's nowhere else she can do that. And I love. And you're right, though. I think it is similar to the Babadook in a lot of ways. I think on my podcast we actually did them back to back. We talked about the Babadook and Under the Shadow together because they have quite a lot of the same themes, but it also is quite a lot like movies like Guillermo del Toro's The Devil's Backbone, which is, again, has that missile bomb like in the center of it and sort of causing the drama. And I think like that film, it's kind of as much a political story as it is a personal story as well. So I think compared to the Babadook, it's got more going on as well. I think it's got obviously like a heavy sort of political side as well, and I think it juggles all of that really well.
I think that's such a great comparison, actually, comparing it to Pan's Labyrinth, because I think with the Babadook, like, I could totally see the mother. The Devil's Backbone, but also Pan's Labyrinth, which is also
both.
Yeah, sorry, I misheard you there. But both Guillermo del Toro films, and both quite similar in a sense, because comparing it to the Babadook, I think is a good comparison, because it deals with kind of with motherhood and the pressures of motherhood, and almost a sense of shame over being a bad mother, being seen as a bad mother. But this one is such a political story, like Mike was telling, in the same way as The Devil's Backbone or Pan's Labyrinth. You can also almost see them as like horror realism to a degree, where they're using horror and the fantastical to talk about a very specific moment in a very specific time and place of history. And, you know, even the way that it opens, and for, I want to say, the first half of the film, you could read this as a political drama in a sense. You know, you've got the backdrop of this Iraq-Iran conflict. You've got the constant threat of what's going on outside. You've got the internal domestic drama, and then it pivots to being a horror film. You know, I mean, it is always a horror film, but it also asks us to understand the context within which it's happening, which I think kind of really elevates the film. You know, there's been other horror films made about the mythology of the jinn, but, you know, most of them have been like quite lowbrow B movies, and this just kind of takes the best of dramatic, politically driven cinema and the best of haunted house horrors and the best of kind of really self-contained human dramas, and combines them all into this big mishmash. And I kind of almost, again, that sort of goes back to this idea of why doesn't she just leave? Well, there are so many reasons why she can just leave. And actually kind of watching this film now in isolation because of what's going on the outside, I'm like, oh my God, this is the perfect film to rewatch now, because yeah, of course we could just leave, but we can't. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
What do you make of the kind of the jinn kind of mythology there, this kind of ghost creature? How did that work with you compared to other kind of ghosts in that, or monster in the house stories?
I really liked it because I think, again, it felt more authentic to this setting and this place and this culture. I don't think it gives you an abundance of information about the jinn and exactly what they are and what they do, but I think that's fine. Like, we don't have to know too much. We just have to know that it's this malevolent force or whatever. So in other words, it kind of ticks many of the same boxes as the classic Gothic ghost stories, really. But again, it's so specific to this time and place. So I think that really worked in that way. Yeah,
I thought it was, when you see the figure fully for the first time, it was for me like Babadook. But there were quite a few shocking moments, like when she goes into the bed, she's not sure whether Dorsa is the Dorsa that's outside with her down the stairs, or she hears Dorsa in the room, and she goes into the bed and it turns into a mouth face creature, which that was like, oh shit, that's a bit harsh. So it did go full on supernatural. Which I wasn't really expecting. I thought it was just going to be more like a creepy thing set in the wall.
Okay.
Anna?
No, I love that. In fact, the first time I watched this film was on a screener and on my laptop, and I watched it in my bed, and it absolutely fucking terrified me, that scene, because literally, I mean, it's the one film... It's spectacular on the big screen, don't get me wrong, but it's the one film that I would genuinely recommend people watching a laptop in their bedrooms, because once that scene in the with the bedsheet hits, it's the perfect setting to be absolutely terrified by your own duvet.
Oh my God. And it's also got one of the best jump scares as well. I had the director, I know, Anna, we've both met Babak, and you've interviewed him a whole bunch of times, haven't you? I had Babak Anvari on my podcast as well, and I was asking him about how difficult it is to direct a really effective jump scare these days, because he had that amazing shot where she goes to the window and she looks out through the curtains, and then the kind of hand comes through or something bursts through the window, and it's a dream, I think, but... it's a really clever kind of use of misdirection, the way the camera moves in the opposite direction to the way that she's going and stuff. But yeah, I think there's some really effective scares in a kind of classic horror sense, and that's, again, we keep coming back to it, but that's what I love about it. It's classic vintage horror mixed with something really personal and political, I think, for this filmmaker.
What are your thoughts, guys, about the kids in horror films? Because I think Dorsa was a great horror kid, plus her new acquaintance, I guess is the best way to describe it, who's mute but not mute. Helen, you scary kids in horror.
I mean, it's very fine line quite often between really annoying and kind of believable and essential. But I've already said that, Dorsa's great in this. I think she manages to kind of convey that real confusion of there being kind of supernatural things happening around her that can't be controlled. And then also that kind of fear that she's putting her trust in her mother, protecting her and helping her. But she can also see that her mother doesn't quite understand what's going on and hasn't quite got the handle on it. So it's that kind of double fear of being a child and having those two things going on. And yeah, I kind of wish there might have been a little bit more of the sort of slightly creepy next door kid who's mute but not mute.
Yeah, he was great.
I think kids in horror film, I mean, I quite like them. I think they're a good addition, but I know not everyone does.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, they can, you know, depending on the actor and the character, you know, some kids in horror can be irritating. Some can be really, really creepy, though. I think in some of the best ever horror movies, they are at their scariest because of their scary, creepy kids in them as well. But I suppose the little girl isn't so creepy in this. She's just really, really cute, and you really want her to be okay. That's the thing. So I think that really, again, it adds to the kind of emotional impact of this film.
Yeah. I mean, I just generally find kids creepy, so their presence in general just creeps me out. But yeah, I thought...
So like Pixar films, you're just like, oh no.
No, if they're animated, it's fine. They're cute because they look like cartoon characters. But real ones... terrifying. But Dorsa was super cute, but there was a couple of moments when I was rewatching this where I was like, ooh, is this a little bit of clever misdirection where we're trying to for a minute think that maybe she's manifesting this djinn or something like that? Like it started I started sort of spiraling thinking about an alternative reading of the film, but obviously no, that's not the point of Under the Shadow. But she does really well kind of, and it reminded me of Charlie in Hereditary, the way that we sort of really focus in on Dorsa in a way, and you kind of don't really know whether she's going to be the source of the mayhem or the fear, or whether she's kind of maybe holding on to something that is the thing that is causing all of this trouble, or whether it's all in her head and she's making it up and it's her creepy friend. So there's a lot of questions, and you know, it's a lot more simpler than that, I think. So, but no, she's a fantastic little kid.
What did you guys make of the magic masking tape that could be used to hold the building together and create, you know, put a doll back together and the windows? I thought it seemed to be holding the whole roof at one point.
Well, it's like that like grey. What's that gray tape that appears in every single American film where they have to fix tie duct tape? Yeah, it's like that, isn't it? Just in the 80s.
Yeah. Exactly. And it works well enough, but not well enough that you feel safe. Again, that's the point. Like this whole building feels like it could just collapse at any moment, and that's what's so good about it.
So she was literally just taping over the cracks, and that was enough to make her go, okay, this is fine. This is fine.
I don't actually understand.
Exactly. It's fine for now.
I don't understand that bit where at the beginning when she tells her husband that the tape has been falling off the windows. So I think it has, I mean, don't trust me. I have no idea about DIY or how anything works except movies. But when they put the X on the windows in order to, if they get shattered, that maybe that has something to do with it, that they don't kind of, the glass doesn't go everywhere, or maybe kind of makes the pieces bigger or something like that. So I reckon there's a practical reason behind them putting that on the windows and stuff, which is a kind of a not to a very specific moment, I guess, but that we're thankfully not aware of because we haven't lived through a war-torn city, I think. Yet. I do I do love how we are now getting more and more films from countries that we're not used to seeing films from. So Iran, Iraq, with the raid, I can't remember, was it Indonesia? I can't remember where the raid was set. But I'm super happy to see more and more films from outside of Europe and outside of South America. What have you guys seen many films based in Iran or the Middle East or these kind of regions? Well, this is a British film.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it was actually the UK selection submission to the Academy Awards.
What?
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's set in Iran, though.
It's set in Iran.
Farsi.
It is in Farsi, yeah, but it is technically a British film. But
Okay.
but I get your point, and yeah, I think it's fantastic. I personally, I'm not by any means an expert on Iranian cinema, but I'm always extremely keen to watch films from regions that I'm not that familiar with, and I'm kind of constantly learning, and particularly really keen as well to see different interpretations of familiar horror stories or familiar horror tropes and different folklore. So, you know, kind of the notion and the idea of the djinn, and how that kind of the idea of a haunted house is also reinterpreted by a filmmaker who is Iranian born but British based, is also kind of an interesting amalgamation and kind of mix of different references and different points of view and cultural histories and cultural baggage that kind of makes what goes on screen so much more interesting for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this film has a really interesting balance of kind of East meets West, I suppose, and it's got those kind of very familiar haunted house tropes that we all know and have seen, but it comes to it in a different way and from a different background, and that's really interesting. And like you say, Anna, it is technically a British film, but obviously Babak Anvari now lives in Britain but grew up in Iran and grew up in this time, and so it's very personal to him as well. So and I think it really does bring those two sensibilities that I think this filmmaker has. I think
it kind of always feels like the central character was almost, with not kind of wanting to cover her hair and watching the Jane Fonda, is kind of almost embodying sort of, you know, typical Western kind of traits, but is kind of trapped in that. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but sort of generally it's great to see representation from anything on screen that isn't traditionally kind of white or, you know, American cinema. So, and it's also great that Netflix as a platform is, you know, having these films on there that we can access pretty much universally.
Oh, I was just going to mention that Babak's next film, Wounds, was actually, I think, produced by Netflix, and it's on the platform now as well. So it's very different from Under the Shadow, but one I would definitely people recommend check out if they want to continue watching his work.
What was that one called? Sorry, did I miss what it was called?
Wounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. It stars Armie Hammer and Dakota Johnson, so it's got much more of a kind of Hollywood vibe, I suppose, but still his kind of creepy sensibility.
It's like Reality Bites meets Lovecraft.
Exactly.
Cool. Nice. Thank you.
Well, let's head to the scores.
I'm Sam Clements, host of the 90 Minutes or Less Film Festival, another podcast in the Stripped Media family, a podcast that celebrates movies under 90 minutes long. Each episode, I'm joined by a special guest who selects a movie to join our prestigious lineup. Past guests have come from the worlds of film, television, music, food, comedy, and podcasting. Search for us now on the app you're currently listening to this podcast, or join us at 90minfilmfest.com.
The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA. Welcome to the spreadsheet of dreams, where the Flixwatcher scores are saved and protected for forevermore. We start, as always, with the recommendability, and we'll go to you, Anna. So your recommendability, please, out of 5.
Oh, 5. Totally. I mean, yes, I've recommended this film to a lot of people, and I would. And I have programmed it, and I picked it for this. So yes, 100% 5.
Mike?
I'm going to go very nearly, I'm going to go a 4.8.
Shame on you, Mike.
I love it. I know. I love it. And I would recommend it to all, but I guess if you're a very hardened horror film, I suppose there are a lot of tropes here that you'd have seen a lot in haunted house films, and sometimes I felt like I could see a lot of the scares coming. And I think, funnily enough, I think the stuff I appreciated more was this stuff that wasn't the traditional horror in some ways, but I still absolutely love it. So it's very nearly a 5 out of 5 for me.
Helen?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I really, 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 really wanted to love this, but it just didn't quite connect with me. And also, I didn't find it scary. And I thought the scene under the bed where it kind of turned into this thing with teeth was a bit like, I'm not quite sure what angle that went for me. So, and I think from there, it lost a little bit of its kind of supernatural element for me. But that said, I do think more people should see it. And I was doing a little bit of kind of like reading different user reviews. And interestingly, it's got like 99% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it's the audiences that it has reached seem to really, really love it. And I think more people definitely need to see it. So I'm going to give it a 4 because I do think more people should definitely see it, even if I didn't quite get on with it myself.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 4 as well. I think definitely get more people watching films in different languages. And for me, I think the part I enjoyed a lot more was the setting and the backdrop of it, and the conflicts of her not wearing a headscarf when she was out, but also dancing and exercising to Jane Fonda is real. And one of my best friends growing up, he was Iranian, and he came to the UK, couldn't speak English when he first came here, and I remember his parents being super modern, and I just thought, oh, that's what people are. People from Iran are, they're not as oppressed as the wrong word, but they have a different outlook in Iran to other Middle Eastern and Muslim countries. So I think inside the house is a lot more free than other places. But I was really interested in that backdrop of the Iran-Iraq war, and I feel like I want to watch a film more on that than with the supernatural elements. But having said that, I think it's a really good film. I would recommend it to people who like horror and people who are up for something slightly different. So 4, repeat viewing score. Mike?
Repeat viewing score, that's a tricky one. I loved it, watching it again for this. I would give it a 4.5. I think maybe the impact of the jump scares is lessened a little bit when you watch it again, but I still think there's so much interesting stuff going on here, and I think the performances are so good, particularly by that lead actress. And there's so much kind of inner conflict and turmoil, and actually I noticed and appreciated so much more watching it again, particularly within the sort of internal relationships, and also just what Babak Anvari puts in the frame. Sometimes, you'll just see things happening outside of a window in the background, like a bomb going off or whatever. Again, just kind of adding to that feeling that they are trapped in this place. So I got loads out of it watching it again. So, yeah.
So 4.5. Sorry, I should have gone to Anna first. I apologise. Anna?
I'm gonna give it a 4, because I think if you look at it as a straight up horror film, it does, I think, lose some of its initial impact once you know where the scares are. But completely agree with Mike. The lead performance by Narges Rashidi is so fantastic, and it only once you're done with the horrific stuff, you can really focus and appreciate her performance on its own 2 feet, and also kind of all of the world building and everything that goes on outside the flat that is just hinted at, the relationships, her backstory. There's a lot of details in the film that just really build up the human drama of it, and kind of a lot of really clever direction that you can appreciate once if you're no longer scared, if you know what I mean. So I'd give it a 4.
Helen?
Yes, and I'm probably not going to rush back and watch this again. I would be interested to see the other one you mentioned, Wounds, and see how it kind of transfers into more of an American setting, the director's style. So I'll go for a 2, I think, repeat.
Yeah, 1.5 for me. I'm not sure I'll watch it again. But if it's on in the background, well, it can't because I don't speak Farsi, so I wouldn't be able to take as much after it if I'm not paying 100% attention. Small screen score, Anna.
I'm gonna say 5 because, like I mentioned before, watch it on a laptop in your bed. It's gonna creep you the fuck out so much more than watching it on your TV. But I think it's beautiful on the big screen as well. But in terms of perfect settings for a particular scare in the film, I'd say 5.
Have you ever thrown your laptop or iPad when you've been scared or shocked? Has that ever happened to anyone here?
I haven't thrown it, but I definitely did accidentally close it during watching this film.
I lunged backwards from my laptop once watching I think it was the first time I watched that was on my laptop, and there are so many jump scares in that I one of them actually made me kind of leap backwards from my own laptop.
Okay, Mike, small screen score.
Yeah, I agree with Anna. I think this is a brilliant film to watch on the small screen. I would maybe knock off a couple of little points. I'd maybe say 4.5 again, because there are a few shots, like the ones I talked about, where you can see things happening in the background in cities and stuff that I think are quite subtle, and sometimes that's good to appreciate on a big screen. But then in other ways, it's so good to watch at home on your own in your home setting. It's a great film to watch on lockdown, for example, and also, to be honest, and I know Babak Anvari, the director, says this himself. It is a low budget film, and some of the effects aren't maybe as good as what you might see in cinemas. So again, I think the small screen is more forgiving of that and actually works better for it. So I think it's a great film to watch at home.
Helen?
So not quite a laptop size, but I watched this on iPad, and I had a great time with that. It's particularly when I like watching it with headphones in to get that sound all around me. So yeah, it is also... It kind of makes the horror very close up and personal when you have it in that kind of space. So yeah, I'm going to go 5. I enjoyed watching it on my small screen.
Yeah, I'm going to go 5 as well. I think I wouldn't catch this in the cinema. I think Netflix is a great place to watch this film. Engagement score, Anna.
I'm gonna say 4.5. And I'm only knocking off that 0.5 because I know some people, not to be too melodramatic, but some people are wrong about some things in this life. And one of those things is people's refusal to watch anything with subtitles. Get over it.
Yeah. That's one of the best things about Parasites.
Yeah.
More people will watch those films.
Yeah, hopefully Parasite's massive success will get people to quote director Bong, to overcome the 1-inch barrier of subtitles. And this is a British film, like I mentioned before, but it is in Farsi, and I would say that's the only kind of barrier for people who might be put off by the idea of watching a horror film that is subtitled. But I would just say to them, get over yourself, listen to director Bong, and just watch it.
Did anyone else's Netflix default to English overdub? Because I was watching for the first 5 minutes and I was like...
I was just about to say that, and actually had a few people that listen to my podcast and people that I know say to me like, "Oh, I've watched Under the Shadow and it's really annoying, the dubbing." And I was like, "What?" And when I checked on Netflix seems to automatically play the dubbed version. You have to switch over to subtitles, which is really bizarre.
Yeah, that's weird.
And the voice of the dubbed actor that plays that portrays the lead character does not fit at all. That's the thing. Because I guess I didn't really notice the lips moving so much, but it was just she doesn't look like she makes that sound when she speaks. Is there something going on here? Mike, your engagement score?
I pretty much exactly agree with what Anna said, really. I'd go 4.5. I personally am more engaged with subtitled movies because you can't look away. You have to keep watching the screen. And it wasn't just because of the subtitles. It was because I was so engrossed in this film. It really does engage me, and not just the horror, but all of the other stuff going on as well. So, yeah, I found it incredibly engaging.
Helen?
It's so bizarre with what you were saying about Netflix, because it didn't give me any option. I had the one with subtitles. It can only be some kind of preference. We've had this before with a couple of other things where you watched a dubbed version and I didn't even realise there was a dubbed version of a certain one. So that's really strange. So, I mean, obviously watch this with subtitles, because how else are you going to get a feel for the place and the characters and, you know, so much personality can come through someone's voice. So please don't even begin to not watch this in the language it was recorded in. So yeah, same with you. I think 4.5. Kind of stuck with it, and it's under 90 minutes. So if you can't kind of be engaged, you should be able to be engaged for that amount of time.
Yeah, but people sometimes start googling straight away, don't they? So within 5 minutes, you can start googling. But I'm going to join the 4.5 party because it's got subtitles, so you need to be. And the story was good, and the backdrop was good, and the setting was good, enough to keep you through it, even though I wasn't fully taken by the overall kind of story. So 4.5, that gives us an overall score of 4.20625. Hefty. Bigger than I thought it was going to be.
Anything over 4 is a pretty high score.
So we did ask Twitter to give their opinion. We asked them to review Under the Shadow. So if you're listening for the first time, do follow us at Flixwatcher Pod on Twitter, and you can join in the fun next time we record a show. And we had a couple of responses. Anna, do you want to take us through the first one? Sorry, I've got Twitter up.
Sure, I do. So I think the first one was from the Countdown Pod at the Countdown PC. Sure. And they said, solid but overhyped horror film from a nation not known for making them. 3 out of 5.
But you've debunked that. It was from a UK
nation, so
but it's in a different language.
Sorry, mate, you're wrong on both your opinions.
And Mike.
Let's have a look. This one's from Chris Olden. He says, Under the Shadow is a creepy, sometimes unsettling, claustrophobic movie. It's not scary, though, which was fine by me. And then he gave it 4 out of 5. Yeah, I mean, obviously, whether or not you find something scary is completely subjective. So I get that some people just don't find this film as scary as others. But he's pretty right about everything else.
Yeah. Can you start off, guys, by letting us know where we can find you online, your podcasts, your channels, the festivals you put on that can't happen at the moment?
So I'm on Twitter at Anna B. Demented. I host the Final Girls podcast and the Next Supremes podcast. And when this is all over, I will get back to putting on Underwear Festival and more Final Girls events.
Awesome. Mike?
Nice. I am on Twitter at The Movie Mike, and I produce and host the Evolution of Horror podcast, which you can find in all the normal places you find your podcasts.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us, and thanks, Anna, for choosing the film.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty tunes, and Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Ben, and that's Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.